good evening in Australia, good morning in South Africa and England. I'm really honoured and excited to be talking about the Theatre of Survival, the movie about the space theatre in Cape Town, with the wonderful Pieter-Dirk Uys and Dan Poole and Mark Street. So, um, would the three of you just like to, one by one, just quickly introduce yourselves? Peter, would you like to just introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm sitting here at the southern tip of Africa in a little town called Darling. And I think everything I do now, and I'm 74 years old, everything I do is thanks to my experience at the Space Theatre. So I'm honored and pleased to be here as a sort of a grandparent of the film. And it's like being with old friends because you all know who I'm talking about when I talk about Brian and Yvonne and everybody else. So thanks for including me here today.
Thank you. Dan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name's Dan Poole. I'm one of the director producers and I am sitting in central London, and that is indeed a bike in my shop behind me. Apologies, my place isn't quite as tidy and cool as Peter's, but yeah, thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. Mark, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Mark Street, that fellow filmmaker, also made the film with Dan, and brilliant. I'm glad I'm here. Thanks to Ryan for asking us way back that we're actually in the company of Peter and many of the others. It's just been an inspirational ride, and it's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm Mignon. I was born into an activist family in South Africa, and as a young girl, Melanie Bryceland, Brian and Yvonne's daughter, was one of my best friends. So I spent a lot of my teenage years hanging out at the space where I knew Peter from that time as well. And sitting in the lighting box at the space is what lit my fire to want to go out and become an actor, and subsequently got involved in Theatre for Change and community theatre. So the space really changed my life as well. As Fats talks about in the movie, it was like my university as well, being part of the space. So I'm very excited to have this movie be, brought to the world, because it's really, really important. So I just wanted to start off the conversation we're having tonight by Peter just asking you to just talk about the environment and the context at the time that the Space Theatre was born. What was happening in South Africa? What was happening in theatre? Can you talk a bit about that, please?
You know, when I watched the film reminded me of what was happening around us. If I think back now, I don't think about the politics. I don't think about the fear. I don't think about the horror of what most of South Africans were going through, because we were all in it together. I just celebrated that extraordinary, I suppose, the elixir of optimism. I mean, Brian just had a smile on his face. And no matter what the problems were, and Fats talks about this as well, she left it behind at home and she went there and suddenly there was hope. So we were in the middle of the apartheid pandemic, and I was a privileged white South African and Afrikaner. I mean, I came from a very privileged background. I was also blessed with a Jewish mother who just got out of Berlin in 1937. So I was brought up without many words describing the terror of fear. We were quite naughty. It was like we were like school kids, taking our pants down and waving our penises at the priests. I mean, we never sat down and intellectualized. We never sat down and thought what we were doing was important. We just knew this was the oxygen we needed. And if people came and sat there and listened to what we said and enjoyed what we did and laughed with us and cried with us, we would be on the right track. And so thank you, film. Thank you for the film that actually brought me to the center of the bloodbath. We were protected at the Space Theatre with an enormous amount of background, from Shakespeare to Ethel Fugard, to actors who had been in the business for a long time, who understood man's inhumanity to man. So, well, I was there and I'm here.
Thank you. So, Dan and Mark, I just want you to talk a bit about what drew you to making this movie. It's a really important part of South African cultural history, which has never really been documented before. And I understand Percy Seif had a big part to play in having got it to the point where you came in. But what was it about being involved in this movie? What was it that drew you in?
I think, sorry, I'll just do a little bit of intro, Mark, and then you can pick up. I think what was fascinating about it for us is that we'd been taught by Brian as young actors at drama school. So part of how he taught us was telling these stories of the space and this progressive idea of always doing your own work. You know, in the second year of drama school, you're thinking about agents all the time, and you're wanting to get an agent, you're wanting to be a movie star, and you're wanting to do all these things. But he continually pushed this idea of doing your own work, and the space was always part of the narrative of how he taught and the backbone of that, I suppose. And I mean, we heard stories, and it was always the thing that he came back to. It's like a sort of a grandparent telling stories of the past. Like, it would always drop into that. And I suppose I was fascinated by that at that point, and found out more from talking to Brian, and we'd sit and chat and talk about it. And then that was parked for kind of a number of years, and I went off and worked as an actor and did, you know, another documentary. And then Mark, do you want to pick it up from here?
Yeah, for my part, it was Brian approached me and said, showed me these 25, I think, or more interviews that Percy Seif did, who was the biggest contributor to the space, as Brian would say, financially. Never took a wage, or he took his check but always gave it back to the space. And he was, I mean, I'd love to have met the man, but he got these 25 interviews, his passion for the space and the telling. He really was passionate about telling the story and documenting the space. And he'd spent years with his son-in-law videoing and interviewing. I think they did one with Peter as well. And when I watched these interviews, 25, it was just, it blew my mind, really. And along with that, Brian gave me his book for research. And I was just hearing these stories of all these actors, creative people, directors and writers. And it was just, it was just amazing. It just blew me away. And it's just who wouldn't want to tell that story, really? I'm passionate about the arts and the value of it, educating and opening up people's minds anyway. And to see that there, it had been done. It was just amazing, really. There was no doubt in my mind that I wanted to make this story, having seen all that and meet the people. And as I said early on, having 8-9 years later, it's been, as I was saying to Dan before, it's been a special time. And thanks to everybody that, thanks to Brian for asking me way back then. And I never did thank him for that, but I would have loved to have, it's been amazing. Yeah.
But also the weird thing was, I remember when Brian mentioned it to me, I sort of said no, actually, to begin with, because I having just finished a documentary, I wasn't sure how it was possible to capture this story with very little resources, because we didn't have any money, and we knew it was going to be a niche film in the context of, people still struggle with the historical part of South Africa and how to place it. And if you look at people like the BBC and various other broadcasters, they would say, oh, it's an apartheid movie. Oh, it's been done. Oh, it's this. And it's like, it's not an apartheid movie. It's a film about the arts and how the arts can propagate change. But that's how they place these things. So we always knew it was going to be a struggle financially to try and find a way through. And we also knew that in order to kind of tell the story, the level of archival we'd have to have would be quite, would be a lot. And fortunately, Brian, because he documented so much of the work that happened at the space, he had thousands and thousands of photographs, and we'd be sitting down sometimes and we'd think we'd have them all, and suddenly there'd be like 6 Super 8 videos he'd send over on a WeTransfer that he'd just found, and we're like, that was quite near the end when we were like, oh, we really need something for this. He goes, oh, I've got a Super 8 of or not, wasn't statements, but I've got a Super 8 of this. I'm just sending it over now, and we're like, what? Where did that come from? Oh, it's just in a box somewhere.
It was the rehearsal of statements. It was the rehearsal of statements.
Oh, was it? Okay, it was, yeah, okay.
Wow.
seeing Percy and Yvonne and all of that,
That's right.
putting makeup on backstage and doing the rehearsals, it was like gold. We were like, my God, how long have we read this, Brian?
Yeah. It took us 7 years to get it. 7 years.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. Just before you came in, Peter, Mark was saying how difficult it is to understand how it was and the restrictions. And you were involved in the heyday, in the thick of the Space Theatre, when there was bannings and arrests and sirens going along outside all the time, and people were fearing being arrested, and a lot of the plays were just banned immediately. Do you want to talk about how that was for you, being in the thick of it at that time, and how you came to be part of that?
It wasn't fashionable at the time to be anti-apartheid. It was illegal. So we never actually tried to explore that area through anger. We explored it through entertainment, to try and even get the censor board to buy tickets to come and see what we were doing because they were interested. Of course, then they banned us.
Yes.
That was horrible. I'll tell you something, I had 3 plays banned within 6 months. To have the security police come to the theatre with a letter in a brown envelope was not something people made jokes about. But then when I read the letter, which was 3 A4 pages of crap, and I mean such appalling, badly structured attack. You may not do that, je mag niet doen, of course, in Afrikaans, and then sometimes in English as well, because the swear words, 3 pages of swear words that were banned. I didn't know I knew so many swear words. But that made us laugh. That made us laugh. The idea that there was a typist in the censor board's office having to type out all my swear words was too good to be true.
Yes.
It helped tremendously for us and for me to discover the importance of laughing at fear. To this very day, that is my most important message when I go to schools. And I say to the children, if you're frightened, give your fear a name and laugh at that fear and make it less fearful. You'll never get rid of it. It can still kill you, but be in charge of it. And so we were very much in charge of what was happening to us politically, because we didn't have time to be victims. We were too busy scrubbing floors and cleaning toilets and writing plays and rehearsing plays, sometimes 2 plays at the same time. And there was Brian in the middle, like a Mother Teresa. No, Yvonne was like a Mother Teresa. She was like a Mother playing Cher. You know, there was always this wonderful theatricality. And my first job there was to stop a performance when the security police were on their way. There was always somebody who warned us. That's another interesting thing. There was always somebody in the enemy camp who would phone and say, hey, Brian, listen, you better be careful. The police are coming now. Eh? Keep the people out that aren't supposed to be there. And so Yvonne and Percy would be doing Long Day's Journey into Night, you know, this great classic, marvelous acting, and everybody was like that. And I'm waiting for a moment where I can stop the performance because the police are coming. And Yvonne is in the middle of this monologue and she takes a deep breath and I think, I've got to do it now. And I go, psst, Bonnie. She stops and she drops the ball. She says, yes, lovey. Said, the police are coming. Okay. And they stop. Percy and Yvonne stop. Lights go on. I come on and I say, ladies and gentlemen, we're having a little bit of a disruption. Can our guests please join me? Now listen, there were not 2,000 black people there. There were 2 American black people there, African American, from the embassy. They would come with me down into the wardrobe and I give them coffee and Cook Sisters. And the police would come and we'd hear their boots upstairs, bing, 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 bing. And they would talk Afrikaans. No, that's the officer in Oscar. And one actually said at one stage, Mrs. Bryceland, we know, we like your performance. And off they went. Now, what does that mean? We just went, oh my God, they're all so mad. And the performance went on. Okay, it's a long story, but it just wants to give you that feel that now, thanks to the film, I keep coming back to the film, the importance of the film. It just gives us everything, not just that LMN of the center of the alphabet that we lived in, but the whole Z of that alphabet. And really, truly, I think to confront your fear is to actually be inspired to capture the weapon to make that fear less fearful, and that's humor. I don't know what the boys think.
Yeah, Mignon, could I just ask Peter something? Because obviously we never had any real footage of Yvonne, and I just wondered if you could just tell us, you know, in your thoughts without an hour, because obviously you could go on forever about this, like what she was really like. We heard stories from Brian, of course, a lot of stories, and I've seen lots of pictures, but what was she like as a person and a performer, and her heart? What was that?
Well, she was beautiful. She was always beautiful, and she had a wonderful sense of humor. She was, one day she would be a stage manager, the next day she would help paint toilet, the next day she would go buy toilet paper for the audience, the next day she would do a most extraordinary 20-minute one-woman show, and she would just be there for us, and we were there for her. And she made Brian important. She always was there to respect him, advise, make a joke when we needed to laugh, embrace when we needed some mothering. And she was, yeah, she was really, truly the heartbeat of the Space Theatre.
I would like to respond to that as well, because she was my idol. And for me as a young girl, seeing her raw, natural acting, because she wasn't trained, it was just from the heart, raw acting, is what inspired me to go out and be an actor, because that's really what theatre is about. And she was the greatest actress in South Africa, and you know, I still see her as one of the greatest actors that has ever lived. So. Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about the importance of the film, and the film was dedicated particularly to Brian, Yvonne, and Athol. And very sadly, Brian has just recently left us. So if you, as the two directors of the movie, and Peter, if you would just like to say something about Brian as the father of the space and how he influenced you, and you know, in the movie it's very obvious that he's the father of the space, and how he held the space for everybody and helped everybody feel safe in that crazy environment. But if you would just like to say some words about Brian.
I think one thing which is, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, well, I think for my part, Brian, as Dan said earlier, he was all about, you know, creating your own work. And I mean, it's very hard to talk about Brian, because this is the first actual screening without Brian, you know, without Brian. But for me, it's like just not having him, you know, being able to ask a question. You know, he was always there with an answer. Throughout the whole making of this film, you know, he'd always, if I have a question, he'd go, "I've told you the answer to that, Mark, 5 times." You know, you'd like, "Oh, sorry, Brian," and you know, but he, you know, just like a father figure, really, a mentor, a friend, an inspiration, and you just get a sense of that's what he was like for everybody, really, for his students. And you look back at the pictures at the space, and Brian's there with his camera around his neck. You know, yeah, it just, yeah, I mean, it's hard to put into words, but gonna miss him always, you know. But as Fatima DK said, you know, it's like I'm better for knowing him. That's the thing. You know, we're all better off for knowing Brian, and you know, we'll take him with us. And everything I teach now myself and talk about, and is as Peter said as well. You know, the space helped Peter, Brian's helped me, and will help people who I meet from now on through the teachings of Brian. I think I better stop there before I well up myself.
I think that's right. I think one thing that was really clear in making the film is that he never saw himself being kind of in it. This is the ridiculousness of the situation. He always saw himself being outside of it. He didn't understand when we were filming stuff in South Africa of him. He didn't know why we were filming him, and it was because every story has to have someone to hold your hand through, and kind of who better in the context of it than like the photographer who became a theatre manager, who became an acting tutor, who became all these different things, who was teaching young people how to shoot films on phones before he passed away, you know. Like the guy, like from the very first moment I met him, when he laughed at me for my foibles or whatever, right to the, you know, a week before he passed away, when I was talking to him, like, you know, he was always challenging, but in the most beautiful and lovely way. And it's as Mark says, it's a very strange thing to as death always is, I suppose, but it's a very strange thing to have him gone what feels like so quickly. And the only brilliant part of that for us is that, well, twofold. One, that he got to see the film at the Fugard in Cape Town last year and connect with lots of people there, which was, for us on the outside, was a beautiful thing. Actually, it was I've never seen him like that before. And also in November, we had a screening at one of the drama schools, Central School of Speech and Drama, as part of Black History Month. And he came along, and there were 300 young students. And, you know, to see a young audience with the film with him was like, oh, okay, right. This is, he's dropped back into that kind of like Yoda-esque mentor figure who was just amazing at being able to kind of connect to everyone, whatever age you are, whatever demographic you're from. He just, you know, he cut through the bullshit, for want of a better phrase. And we will miss him, as Mark says, a lot.
Beautiful. Peter, did you want to say something?
Well, every time Brian and I sat together in London, in his little coffee shop, little French coffee shop in Soho, first thing I said, Brian, where's the film? He said, oh, God. I said, Brian, everybody is dying. The audience is dying. People don't even know what to talk. Space means up there. 2001 Space Odyssey, which was also our theme song. And what the film is doing now is actually telling the story to a generation that wasn't even born in those days, to a generation that doesn't even understand what apartheid actually meant. It wasn't just a T-shirt and standing outside the South African embassy in Trafalgar Square, getting on the 7 o'clock news and having tea at home. You know, when you stood up against apartheid, when you were black, you died. And when you were too frightened to even think about it. And I love Brian in the film because you have shown Brian not just now, but you showed Brian's emotion right from the moment it started. His excitement, his confusion, his fear, his cheek, the unbelievable cheek to do that to the apartheid government and laughing. And then his sadness, and he was in tears. I think he is really, truly the glue, the humanity that brings that film together as a experience of communication and not just as a picture show. And I really congratulate the team, the two chaps who are on this with me, who are really can be proud of what they've done. And Brian would be thrilled. Yes, I'm so sorry he's not here, but he is here. He is here. Every time we talk about the film, every time we see the film, he's here. So I'm so excited to hear what Australia is going to make. The South Africans in Australia are going to, for those of you who do remember the space, and those of you who have grandchildren who say, what does that mean? And then you say to your grandchildren, it means you can do anything. If you believe in it and if you work towards it, you can do anything.
Yes.
I think, could I just add, just as well, it was always making sure that we had this as a celebration and bringing the youth into it. At the end, when we bring the, you know, when you see the actors of today and how, you know, everyone at the space, including Brian, who led that sort of, you know, it's acting, the arts is for all, and it's still a way we can change and educate. And it's, I mean, and that's the thing as well. It's in the now as well. We're bringing the space into the now for those youngsters. And as Dan said at Central, you saw them, they were nodding, they were cheering. When they saw John Carney and Winston up on that stage with the Tony Awards, they literally were looking at each other, laughing, and seeing the journey that these creatives went on and succeeded in many ways. And the bravery of everybody, we need it today. And I think that was the important thing of seeing these youngsters today going, yeah, this is still relevant.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
important.
So that was kind of going to be
Sorry.
my last question to you all, is what was the legacy that the space and all those involved in the space, what was the legacy that it has left for the future, for South Africa, for the future of actors and playwrights and people involved around the world? What is the legacy that the space left us?
Well, it feels to me like one of the great parts of that legacy is that now this film exists that hadn't been told thus far. And as Peter said, it will always exist. And, you know, it becomes a document. There are so many things and elements that were connected to the space in that period which were eradicated and forgotten and lost. And it only takes one generation for anything to be forgotten, right? I mean, it doesn't take a long time. And so hopefully, you know, through this film, that story now exists. It's part of the tapestry of you know, the historical past, and it's there for everyone in the future, and for the youth, and for the older generation to reminisce about that change and what happened. And you know, I think we always felt like it was also actually quite a zeitgeist movie, and it's been difficult trying to convince festivals of that, but it really felt like it was landing at a point when we really needed it, like across the globe, whatever country you're on, without getting too political about it, even though I love politics. But, you know, you've got the situation that's happening in America, the situation that's happening in this country actually as well, in the UK, the situation in Israel and Palestine. There are crossovers in all of these things that we can reference. We can get lost in them, but we can reference that. And so it feels like this is a film that really deals with those zeitgeist moments of like, what do we want? What should we put up with, and what are we prepared to put up with before we actually try and take back some control of what actually, as a population, we actually desire to have?
Yes. Peter, did you want to say anything?
Legacy. The world has lost its memory. The world has got Alzheimer's. The world doesn't look back. And we need to just remind the world that things have happened in the past that have made so many things possible. The space made it possible that we could actually carry on an alternative theatre for all those years going into now. We are now in the middle of the Third World War with Corona. When we come out of it, everything is going to be different. The theatre might actually not exist anymore. We might have to go back to a space theatre because there will be no money. But there will be commitment, and there will be somebody who will say, have you seen that film about the space theatre? They did it then. Why don't we do it now? Get up on the table and sing your song, and somebody might give you a cool drink.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for creating this movie and being part of it, and for having this conversation tonight.
Mignon,
Thanks, everybody.
Can I just say, like, before we go, the amount of people that like have to be thanked for the existence of this film supersedes anything that we can say on this chat. And I think anyone who watches the film, please watch the credits and just literally take note, because everyone involved in that list gave their time for free, gave their resources for free, and that goes right down to all the participants on screen. You know, the inherited footage that we got from Percy and David, his nephew, and all the professionals from Technicolor through to Twickenham Film Studios who made this possible. So we have to say that, because we want to say that, and it's such a huge cast of people who made this possible, and production team, that we wouldn't have it without them. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. And great to see you, Peter. And I can't wait to see you in London again, one of your shows.
Yeah, lovely to see you, Peter.
I will be there. But I've got to go and wash my hands now. Remember, wash your hands.
Yes, wash your hands.